Blink. The power of thinking without thinking. Malcolm Gladwell. Blink. 5. Listening to doctors. Let's take the concept of thin slicing one step further. Imagine you work for an insurance company that sells doctors, medical, and malpractice protection. Your boss asks you to figure out, for accounting reasons, who, among all positions covered by the company, is most likely to be sued. Once again, you are given two choices. The first is examine the physician's training and credential, and then analyze their records to see how many errors they've made over the past few years. The other option is to listen in on very brief snippet of a conversation between his doctor and his or her patient. By now, you are expecting me to say the second option is the best one. You are right. And here's why. Believe it or not, the risk of being sued for malpractice is very little to do with how many mistakes a doctor makes. Analysis of malpractice lawsuits show that there are highly skilled doctors who get sued a lot and doctors who make a lot of mistakes and never get sued. At the same time, the overwhelming number of people who suffered an injury due to the negligence of a doctor never filed a malpractice suit at all. In other words, patients don't file lawsuits because they've been harmed by shoddy medical care. Patients file lawsuits because they've been harmed by shoddy medical care and something else happened to them. But that something else is how they were treated on a personal level by their doctor. What comes up again and again in a malpractice case is that patients say they were rushed or ignored or treated poorly. People just don't sue doctors they like, is how Alice Buchan, a leading medical malpractice lawyer, puts it. In all the years I've been in this business, I've never had a potential client walk in and say, I really like this doctor and I feel terrible about doing it, but I want to sue him. You've had people come in saying they want to sue some specialist and they'll say, we don't think that doctor was negligent. We think it's your primary care doctor who was at fault. And the client will say, I don't care what she did. I love her. And I'm not suing her. Buchan once had a client who had a breast tumor that wasn't spotted until it had metastasized, and she wanted to sue her internist for the delayed diagnosis. In fact, it was a radiologist who were potentially at fault, but the client was adamant. She wanted to sue the internist. In our first meeting, she told me she hated this doctor because she never took the time to talk to her and never asked about other symptoms. Buchan said, she never looked at me as a whole person, the patient told us. When a patient has a bad medical result, the doctor has to take the time to explain what happened and to answer the patient's question to treat him like a human being. The doctors who don't are the ones who get sued. It isn't necessary. Then to know much about how a surgeon operates in order to know his likelihood of being sued. What you need to understand is the relationship between the doctor and his patients. Recently, the medical researcher Wendy Levinson recorded hundreds of conversations between a group of physicians and their patients. Roughly half of the doctors had never been sued. The other half had been sued at least twice. And Levinson found that just on the basis of those conversations, she could find clear difference between the two groups. The surgeon who had never been sued spent more than 3 minutes longer with each patient than those who had been sued did. 18.3 minutes was 15 minutes. They were more likely to make orienting comment, such as first I'll examine you, and then we'll talk the problem over, or I'll leave time for your questions, which help patients get a sense of what their visit is supposed to accomplish, and when they ought to ask a question. They were more likely to engage in active listening, saying such things as, "Go on, tell me more about that." And they were far more likely to laugh and be funny during the visit. Interestingly, there was no difference in the amount of quality of information they gave their patient. They didn't provide more details about medication or the patient condition. The difference was entirely in how they talked their patients. It's possible, in fact, to talk this analysis even further. The psychologist Nanjali Ambadi listened to Levinson's tapes, zeroing in on the conversation that had been recorded between just the surgeon and their patient. For each surgeon, she picked two patient conversations, then from each conversation, she selected two 10-second clips on the doctor talking, so her slice was a total of 40 seconds. Finally, she content filtered the slices, which means she removed the high-frequency sounds from speech that enable us to recognize individual words. What's left after content filtering is a kind of garble that preserves intonation, pitch, and rhythm, but erases content. Using that slice and that slice alone, Ambadi did a Gottman-style analysis. She had judges rate the slice of garble for such qualities as warmth, hostility, dominance, and anxiousness. And she found that by using only those ratings, she could predict which surgeon got sued and which ones didn't. Ambadi says that she and her colleague were totally stunned by the result, and it's not hard to understand why. The judges knew nothing about the skill level of the surgeon. They didn't know how experienced they were, what kind of training they had, or what kind of procedure they tended to do. They didn't even know what the doctors were saying to their patient. All they were using for their prediction was their analysis of the surgeon's tone of voice. In fact, it was even more basic than that. If the surgeon's voice was judged to sound dominant, the surgeon tended to be in the sued group. If the voice sounds less dominant and more concerned, the surgeon tends to be in the non-sued group. Could there be a thinner slice? Malpractice sounds like one of those infinitely complicated and multi-dimensional problems, but in the end, it comes down to a matter of respect. And the simplest way that respect is communicated is through tone of voice, and the most corrosive tone of voice that a doctor can assume is a dominant tone. Did anybody need to sample the entire history of a patient and the doctor to pick up on that tone? No, because a medical consultation is like one of Gottman's conflict discussion or a student dorm room. It's one of those situations where the signature comes through loud and clear. Next time you meet a doctor and you sit down in his office and he start to talk, if you have to sense that he isn't listening to you, that he's talking down to you, and that he isn't treating you with respect, listen to that feeling. You have thin sliced him and found him wanting.